Chill, relax.
Okay. Hi, I'm 𝗀𝗻.
Hi, I'm Dylan.
So for today's topic, we'll have Dylan here, who's a practicing lawyer for 3 years now, who specializes in tax law, to discuss about the topic of what exactly does a tax lawyer do. So, as an introduction, could you tell us how exactly did you come about to this field?
Okay. My starting work was actually in the construction litigation. So I was exposed to construction litigation work, especially construction arbitration, 𝗧𝗶𝗺𝗺, and also before construction claim before the High Court. We call it a normal civil court and all that. So in terms of tax, that is where I was slowly exposed to RPGT tax, stamp duty, and of course some of the developers company seeking advisory on how to claim tax deduction under Section 33 of the Income Tax Act 1967. So in short, we call it ITA, Income Tax Act. So slowly also, I've been working with a tax professor on a part-time basis, where he would actually get me to help him to summarize tax cases and also do research on the latest tax cases. So basically it can be said that I've been doing tax cases on a part-time basis, and also I've been exposed to certain tax cases introduced by him. For example, there was one case on, I think it was during the GST era, in related to property sales and purchase agreement, whereby the developer was trying to charge my client a GST amount. So at that moment, my client was asking advice from us whether or not the developer can claim so, because under the GST Act, GST is actually an amount included together with the purchase price. So when my client first paid the amount, by right the GST amount has already been included and should have been paid, considered paid to the developer. But the developer is like acting, they are not aware of the law. They're trying to claim again against my client. So my client was trying. We helped my client to draft a letter to the developer, and the developer after that never come back to my client and claim for the GST amount. I think it's the commercial shop lot at nearby here, the shop lot. KL Gateway, sorry, KL Gateway. So another case is on, I think, summary judgment against a director, whereby if a taxpayer couldn't pay for the tax assessment issued by the Inland Revenue Board of the government, basically what happened is the government would usually file a summary judgment to get a paper judgment against the taxpayer straight away, and then to immediately file for a executions of bankruptcy against the taxpayer to make him literally bankrupt. So in that case, I think I've advised my client, we forestall, we negotiate with the Inland Revenue Board not to execute the judgment paper and to file the subsequent execution bankruptcy order. So my client managed to enter into a 12 months installment payment. So this is also one of the skills that tax lawyer must have, is the ability to negotiate with the IRB to pay money in an installment manner, because at the end of the day, the Inland Revenue Board is still a Malaysian government tax collector. Their objective is to assist the government in collecting tax revenue to run the country. So they are more than happy to accept any proposal from the taxpayer, even if there is a paper judgment obtained. So it's not like the end of the world if you have a client that already been sued by the government and there's a paper judgment entered against them. They can always negotiate and get government to accept their proposal to pay in installment.
It's like there's a body for this, isn't it? Like, let's say you've been declared bankruptcy, and then you still have a board that can help you negotiate for a much more reasonable term.
The one that I was talking about is basically before you're being declared bankrupt. But to be declared bankrupt, there are a lot of steps for the applicant or the party, for example, in my example is the government of Malaysia, they have to comply. They have to start with a bankruptcy notice, then petition before it becomes a final order. So in between, you can still negotiate with the Inland Revenue Board and tell them I actually have the money, but I can't pay lump sum. Can I pay installment for the next 12 months? So most of the time, Inland Revenue Board, rather than making you a bankrupt, and you can't have the ability to find income to pay them, they will accept the offer to pay 12-month installment, 9 months, based on the ability to be paid.
Okay. Yeah, like usually when one discusses about tax law, what should usually come in mind then?
Okay, in the context of Malaysia itself, in terms of tax, we first have to understand the market that we're dealing with and who are our competitors. As a tax lawyer, okay, first we have to know the competitors such as tax agent and accountants. So accountants, they can be doing auditing work. Some accountants can be doing accounting entry, and some can be giving tax advisory. So a chartered accountant actually has all this expertise. They plan the tax planning for the client. So let's say if a taxpayer got a tax issue with the Inland Revenue Board, the first thing the taxpayer would approach is their accountant. The accountant might advise them to just pay off the amount claimed by or assessed by the Inland Revenue Board. That's one thing, the accountant side. For the tax agent itself, usually they will be representing the taxpayer to appeal before what we call a Special Commissioner of Income Tax. In short, we call it SCIT. Or if it's involved a indirect tax such as custom, excise, the tax agent would still represent the taxpayer to appear before a custom tribunal. But I think last year budget, government budget, 2019, they have announced that the SCIT and the custom tribunal would be combined and would be known as a tax tribunal. So that one tax tribunal body would hear cases for all indirect and tax cases. There wouldn't be any delineations of tribunal among these two different type of taxes. And then for tax lawyers, how do we come into the picture? It's basically after the taxpayer's tax agent appeal before the special commissioner. Let's say they lose in the special commissioner level, the tribunal level. What the taxpayer's remaining remedy is to appeal. Sorry, they cannot appeal because there is no provision of appeal in the Income Tax Act. What they can do is to file a judicial review, and it's very common in Malaysia High Court that you can see a lot of these top tax law firms. They will file judicial review before the High Court, so that they can get the High Court judge to review the tax assessment that has been decided by the Special Court. Special Court is SCIT, Special Court, or the Custom Tribunal. So that is where we come into the picture, because we are the only one that have locus. Locus means the right to appear before a High Court. So it's not simply any simple layman can do that. They need to be an understanding of the substantive tax law, and because it's also involved one's liability. So tax agent, they are not allowed under the law to appear before the High Court because they are not a qualified advocate and solicitor. So that's, I think, the basic delineation between tax agent's role, your accountant, your chartered accountant, and lawyer like us. The tax lawyer comes into picture. But in another sense, there are also tax lawyers that does tax litigation, like the one that I say, you file judicial review. That's one thing. You also file certain civil procedure. We call it interlocutory application. For example, stay application. Let's say the special court has decided against the taxpayer, whereby the taxpayer has to pay 10 million. Okay, he might not pay yet. He might have not paid yet, but now he has to pay because he had lost in the special court. Okay, what he can do then before your tax lawyer file a judicial review? The tax lawyer can file a stay order to stay the tax assessment order is affirmed by the special court at the tribunal level. So stay order would be one of the weapon that the tax lawyer will apply, to at least protect at the interim period, short-term period for the taxpayer. Because some taxpayers, if they really have to pay this 10 million, it might affect their business cash flow and all that. You never know, they might have invested in certain projects, their business might be expanding. So that's why a lot of the time businesses, they rather hire a tax lawyer to fight their tax appeal case and not just pay it off before the IRB. But the third thing that we can look into is basically, if a tax lawyer file a judicial review or stay order, usually there will be a timeline between the filing date and also the date where the High Court would set a hearing date for all these interlocutory application or rules of court application like judicial review. It also acts as a short-term injunction whereby they can buy time for this business owner within the date of filing until the date of hearing, whereby the taxpayers or business owner within this period can negotiate with the income tax officer that issue them the letter and tax assessment to enter into a settlement and make a payment of 6-month installment, 9-month installment, 12-month installment. So they can actually have this kind of cash flow payment planning with the IRB instead of paying one lump sum. Yeah.
Oh, I understand that just now you mentioned like every area of law there's the contentious and non-contentious, but
correct.
Like you said, there's non-contentious is like you determine as tax planning,
correct,
and contentious is basically tax litigation.
Correct.
So which, like, do you handle both areas or do you specifically in one of this?
Okay. At first, I did handle a bit of the tax litigation, which was contentious. But then now I'm more into the non-contentious part, whereby I deal a lot with the Inland Revenue Board in respect of real property gain tax and stamp duty, because for the area of practice for taxation law itself is very wide, and it has a lot of tax subset of tax area. For example, we can maybe subdivide it into two basic tax subset: direct tax and indirect tax. Within direct tax, you can have income tax. Okay, you can have real property gain tax, and last time you can have GST, and now it has been abolished and replaced with SST. So we go to the second branch, you can see for indirect tax itself, you can have sales and service tax, SST. You can have custom and excise duty. You can also have what do you call it? Indirect tax, SST, custom tax. Okay. So within income tax itself, the Income Tax Act 1967, you also have another third level of subset: income tax, business tax, employment tax, anti-avoidance of tax evasion. You also have deductions of expenses under Section 33 under income tax itself. And for real property gain tax, you also have to calculate the acquisition price, the disposal price of the RPGT. There are actually many layers among each subset. So the point I'm making is that at first I thought I could do everything, but because of the area of industry that I was in when I first started as a pupils, which was in construction. So I slowly moved into a property tax sector. So my area of practice right now and nowadays mostly revolve around real property gain tax, stamp duty, income tax. So I do advise a lot of the property investors even developers, I think, and a lot of the property agent that owns property, how they can best land their tax planning when they first purchase a property. Because a lot of this they don't realize when they sell their property, they will actually be subjected to income tax by the Inland Revenue Board.
Oh.
Because they have a mindset and perception that when they sell a property off the market, they only need to pay real property gain tax. And some don't even want to pay the real property gain tax, and they just want to apply for exemptions. Because every owner also have a once in a lifetime exemption under RPGT.
Oh.
So a lot of them they adopt that kind of method. So this is where I come into place and I advise them you should actually reconsider this option and maybe opt for paying income tax. But it depends on the case by case basis. Some buy 3 properties in one time, some buy 1 property in one go. So the advice on this is really on a case to case basis.
So like you mentioned, in this tax law area you have to go compete against your tax agent, your accountant.
Understand.
So how is it like in your experience, the market conditions of this place then? Your employability, your pay wage and saturation.
Okay. I think my point on this particular issue is that there is actually a indirect capture of market share by this tax agent and accountant, because for the taxpayer to finally come to the tax lawyer to fight their case because they at that moment doesn't have the particular money to pay the tax sum yet. Is actually they have to go through the tax agent and the accountant. So in between, before they even approach a tax lawyer, they might have been advised by their accountant or tax agent to just settle the amount with the Inland Revenue Board officer. So they could have settled the tax cases or agreed in an installment payment with the Inland Revenue Board before they even come to a tax lawyer. But usually when tax cases that has reached a tax lawyer is usually tax assessment that involve more than 10 million, 30 million. Some even reach like billions. Malaysia, I think, got two cases last time I heard reach billion. I think involved a TNB, Tenaga Nasional Berhad. But it was settled, I think, subsequently, because I don't see any reported cases on that. There's one case I read, I think, on 𝗧𝗶𝗺𝗧 Bank. They're claiming for capital allowance for 200 million. 200 million. So that definitely would need to have a tax lawyer. Imagine you have to pay 200 million without fighting at the court. I don't think any bank would do that. That's like, how are you going to explain to the shareholder? So I think for company, why they want to fight before the court to at least get the amount of tax reduced or dismissed, it's because the amount of tax to be paid to the government is so high that it might affect the declaration of dividend of the company. It might affect the future planning of expansion of the company. So they would rather take a chance to fight it at the court. But I think there are a lot of successful cases where tax lawyers have successfully get the court to review the special SCOM decision. So some got dismissed. Of course, majority of the judicial review cases wasn't even allowed by the court. Basically, for the judicial review, there are also 2 levels. They have to go for the leave stage. Instead to get permission to at least submit to the court that there is a tax issue dispute. The majority of them, the leave stage for the court to hear the judicial review also did not go through. So, but in between, they actually bought some time for the taxpayer or the business owner to actually negotiate with the Inland Revenue Board to later on enter into maybe a settlement agreement. But in tax law, we call it composite agreement. It's different from a normal settlement agreement. It's a composite agreement. It is formed under a section under the Income Tax Act. I think it's, if I can recall it correctly, maybe it's 126 Section 126. It's called composite agreement, whereby it binds both the Inland Revenue Board and the taxpayer. Because why settlement agreement doesn't work in any negotiation between a taxpayer and Inland Revenue Board is because of the principle of 𝗧𝗶𝗺𝗀. 𝗧𝗶𝗺 means if Inland Revenue Board promises you, taxpayer, that you only need to pay 5 million, they can actually retract back the promise. They can actually come back to you and ask you to pay. No, the 5 million that we promise you doesn't bind us and you. We want you to pay 20,000 right now. So principle of 𝗧𝗶𝗺𝗀 actually prevents Inland Revenue Board from retracting, but it doesn't apply to Inland Revenue Board.
Oh, it does.
It doesn't apply. That is where, remember, there's a 𝗧𝗶𝗍, the 𝗧𝗶𝗍 is Self-Voluntary Declaration Program by the Inland Revenue Board. There were cases whereby Inland Revenue Board actually reopened cases against genuine party who had declared asset before the Inland Revenue Board, because the condition was that under 𝗧𝗶𝗍, any undeclared income that are declared to the IRB wouldn't reopen the cases against me. So I might have an undeclared income property worth 10 million, but because of that opportunity and program, I declared to the IRB that I actually have 1 million cash extra or tax, and that one property. Actually behind I have like 20 properties that I have not yet declared to IRB. So they take advantage of that, declare this asset, and IRB later on found out they actually have more than that asset. But IRB has made as one of the conditions that whatever you declare, I take it as genuine from you, so I won't reopen a case against you. But then they realized there were a lot of people trying to take advantage of lie through the scheme. So IRB also reopened case back against them.
So like this basically goes back to because promissory estoppel is a equitable remedy, then the maxims of it is like come with clean hands and all that. So like if I, the one who came with clean hands, didn't do it, already came with clean hands, but you, the one who I gave the promise to, didn't come with clean hands, why should I uphold this remedy, right? This promise.
Correct.
It's like how this principle operates basically is this like.
I agree with the principle of equity, whereby you have to come with a clean hand. Definitely agree with that point, because some people, like taxpayer, they really try their best, to hide whatever extra income or asset they have. But another second point, maybe we can look from the perspective of the government. At the end of the day, the Inland Revenue Board is a government tax collector that has a huge responsibility in assisting government to collect revenue. And if a government doesn't have a revenue and money, they cannot run the country effectively, and to channel it to respective ministry for them to then run programs and all that. So for most of the 𝗧𝗶𝗺𝗀 that cannot be invoked against IRB tax reported cases, judges agree that 𝗧𝗶𝗺𝗀 doesn't apply to IRB, but they did not use the equity principle or did not come with clean hand. They went further into that. They say because Inland Revenue Board is a tax collector for the government, 𝗧𝗶𝗺𝗀 cannot apply to them, and they can always reopen and reassess back a taxpayer, let's say, that has paid a real property gain tax, and subsequently the IRB wanted to reopen a case and reassess them for income tax. It is nothing wrong with the IRB for doing so, because the money collected by IRB doesn't go into IRB. It goes into the Ministry of Finance, it goes into the consolidated fund of the government, which will later on use and be redistributed back to the rakyat, whatever. So I think that is the position taken by the Malaysian court, whereby 𝗧𝗶𝗺𝗀 doesn't apply to the Inland Revenue Board. But composite agreement entered between taxpayers and the Inland Revenue Board will be binding on both the taxpayer and the Inland Revenue Board. So the solution to that is go for composite agreement or arrangement between IRB and the taxpayer. That would be the best, at compromise solution for both sides.
That's interesting.
Mm.
So after all this, it definitely sounds like you have experienced all this like and whatnot. So what have been the highlights of your career then?
Okay, my highlight of my career when I first started as a pupils, I used to work in a construction litigation firm. So I was exposed with a construction claim whereby the other party was suing us based on the basis of tort. They try to bring the element of tort into picture that whereby there's a duty of care between a subcontractor and a main contractor. So I think my team at that point of time, my ex-boss, he managed to strike out the claim, and it was a highlight because my boss explained to me that striking out is a very important action, because once you manage to strike out the other side's claim, which means officially there is no more case.
Oh.
And that is why a lot of senior lawyers, they actually focuses in handling striking out, because this is also determines whether or not there will be a case continue binding of both parties. But talking about when I first transitioned to becoming my first year lawyer and all that, of course one of the highlight in terms of tax cases is realizing how I can help to save, not save, but helping client to pay the right amount of tax. In terms of perfection of title, there's one case whereby it's a very, very complex transfer of property, whereby property was in Langkawi. I think it was a 1994 hotel suite hotel, unit, owned by some 𝗶𝗺𝗃, and then they have subsequently transferred hand to few buyers. So document for sale and purchase agreement all gone. So under the stamp tax, for us to help this client to claim, so to get exemption from paying the stamp duty, we have to have the original document, the charge form, the SPN, all that. But the client lost it. So if they do not have that, we cannot present to the stamp office to get exemption, which means they have to repay again the stamp duty. We call it ad nominum, which means the scale rate. So based on the amount of loan, let's say 1 million, then they have to pay a scale rate, which is quite high. If they have an original document, then we can just help them to get an exemption and pay a 10 ringgit nominal fee before the stamp office. But I think at the end of the day, we managed to get exemption because somehow they managed to produce the adjudication cert, which is accepted by the stamp officer. I think that is also one of my highlights, whereby a good tax lawyer managed to help the client to get a piece of documentary evidence whereby it saved client thousands of ringgit. This is what happened in tax litigation also, whereby a small piece of document can determine whether or not one particular item can be deducted under Section 33. Or how do you categorize a subject matter in your accounting entry? So how do you classify it determines whether it's a capital or revenue. That is also how we tax lawyers argue on the principle of the substantive tax law. Because another thing, there is a difference between how legal lawyer interpret income tax act and also the accountant interpret accounting classification. There is a difference, and the binding part is whereby tax lawyer is the last person who present the definition of certain income tax provision to the court. Our position would be the one accepted by the court or either rejected by the court, and thereby binding on all the accounting. Because accountant, they might accept certain payment based on, like money has been issued out, they will record money has been issued out, or money, a product has been sold, but money has not been received from the other client. But they've recorded in their account that product has been sold. So product has been sold means there is a stock withdrawal under accounting principle. So by right, for that particular year, their company is entitled to sort of deduct, because they've gone on their product. It's a cost. They've gone, they've maybe sold out. By right, they can be allowed to deduct from their income tax submission that amount of cost. But under taxation law, the court doesn't allow. Why? Because you have not yet received money yet. So accounting and interpretation of tax are totally different, whereby it is based on accrual basis. So only when accrue, let's say I sell this product, I provide you service, advisory worth 300,000. I've recorded, I've issued an invoice, but I've not received money from you yet. By right, the Inland Revenue Board can come after me and tax me, even though I've not yet received money from you, because I've already issued a document saying at this point of time, I've already billed you 300K. So in tax litigation, documentary evidence is very, very important. You can either make you have to pay extra, have to pay the amount of tax assessed, or you are exempt from paying the amount for that particular year of assessment. So this is where I say the procedural part, your evidence law skill has to be very strong. If you can rebut what maybe the counsel for the Inland Revenue Board on that particular document, you don't need to win on the substantive law. You can win on the procedural. If the documents are not complete, when you get with one of the important documents that establishes the cause of action, you can apply for a striking law. You can also win the tax cases without being good in substantive law.
So it's like
but I've not yet seen lawyer done that in Malaysia, because lawyers, even tax lawyers, they're too fixated on the substantive tax law. I've not yet seen a lawyer that focuses in all these procedural law to win a tax case. So this is something very new. I think maybe the development of the tax law from time to time would see new cases like this to pop up. No, because every lawyer have their own style. Some lawyers, they have their own strategy to always, when we go by this method, judicial review, even though it's losing in the court, but they can buy time for the client. But perhaps you can explore new method whereby you can win cases before the High Court, and you don't need to buy time for the client. But I don't blame them. I mean, some tax lawyers, they have their agenda. If they lose in the High Court, they can always advise the client to appeal, and they can charge for it. So it's also strategy. I totally understand whatever strategy that particular lawyer employ. They have their own method of doing it. It's either a short way or a long way.
It's like quite technical, everything.
Correct. No, because I've been reading tax cases from the year 2010 until the latest. I literally has been summarizing most of the tax cases, so I can know what judicial review tax cases that has been allowed or reviewed. It's only in very exceptional cases that judicial review will be allowed. These I think they apply the principle of judging sin or something, because tax lawyer will always file judicial review when the taxpayer has not yet even filed a appeal before the special court. So how do you expect a High Court judge to review when there is no decision assessed by the Special Commissioner of Income Tax? But the lawyer will always forward the submission and argument saying that you can always review the tax assessment issued by the Inland Revenue Board. But that is not a final decision. It's just a notice asking you to pay money. So there's always this debate. Same argument forwarded by the same lawyer. but I think they managed to buy time for the client. So if that's what the client wants, they're starting wrong for a lawyer to do so. Yeah. Because at the end of the day, our duty is to give and the best interest or protect the best interest of our client. It can be a losing case, but maybe you can buy some time for the client. So there's nothing wrong with that.
Oh, I see. Then, like with more effort we've given in so far, we can clearly see that. Then, what's your definition of success then?
Definition of success. In terms of tax lawyer, definition of success is a successful tax lawyer has to be able to counter a tax